Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellowshow. I am your host, the Fellow KGB. You can follow me on Twitter at the Fellow KGB. And it is Saturday. It's August 22nd. It's about noon. I'm going to be looking at some interesting stats and just how certain stats and numbers correlate to fantasy success. So I have on the main screen, if you're watching on YouTube, I have this correlation to PPR fantasy points for running backs. And this was, I think I pulled this off of Scott Barrett's Twitter. You can follow him. Let me just pull him up real quick so we can make sure we get the right credit where credit is due. But Scott Barrett, you can find him at Scott Barrett DFB. He's a really good, interesting numbers guy. He knows what he's doing. He's got a really good site called fantasypoints.com. But anyways, this is a really interesting metric because he found, I don't know how he figured out the correct codes to do this, but he figured out how to look at certain stats and realize that, hey, these stats are more important than other stats for fantasy football. So for a running back, total yards is the most important stat. Not snaps. Snaps is up there. Touches is up there. Total touchdowns is up there. Rushing yards is up there. But even receptions, I don't know if receptions are down here. For PPR backs, you want the guy that's going to get the yards. He's going to be on the field a lot. He's going to get a lot of touches. And he's going to get a lot of touchdowns. And so, yeah, rushing yards here, but it's the total yards here that correlates with the fantasy PPR aspect of it. So when I looked at this a little bit, I tried to figure out, okay, how can I figure out who's going to be accounting for the most yards? So if we go to, we'll get to receivers. I have another chart here for the receivers, but we're just going to kind of hop into my projection document. And we are going to take a look at my running back yards. And the way that I kind of figured this out is I didn't create the stat, but it's a stat called yard share, where you're going to measure the amount of yards a player accounts for in his offense. So we're going to take the total amount of rushing yards a player gets and the amount of receiving yards a player gets. And then what you do is you divide that number by the total amount of a team's yards. And I did a study of this, looking at last year's numbers and where players finished. And so if you're on the fantasyfellowship.com, you're going to go to 2019 yard share down here. And again, we're looking at this because as of that chart that we looked at the beginning of the show, total yards are the most important asset for fantasy running backs. So here we go. I kind of define what yard share is and just some text here. But these were the top 12 RBs in yard share last year. So, of course, McCaffrey, he dominated. He had over almost 2,400 yards himself. So he had an insanely high yard share of about 40%. The next closest back was Nick Chubb at 30.83. So you're looking here. These are the top 12 running backs in yard share, with the lowest being 23.84. But if you look here, there's kind of like a cutoff here of 25 and up. So if a player gets more than 25 yard percentage, he's probably going to have a good year. And then if you look here on the left column, I show where these running backs finish. So I'm just going to read these numbers down. So the top 12 running backs in yard share, last year they finished RB1, 8, 7, 5, 6, 2, 16, 13, 4, 3, 10, and 20. So the worst one in the top 12 of yard share finished 20th, and that's Philip Lindsay. And you can kind of see he's a little bit in a tier below these guys. So if we're looking at RBs above 25% yard share, you're going to find the worst ones were RB 16 and 13. The rest of them were RB1s. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 out of 11 running backs here finished in the top 12 as RB1. So that it's showing me a really strong indicator that, yes, yards are the most important stat. I could probably figure out another way to look at this too, is if I looked at the total yards here, and not instead of a percentage, we just added Christian McCaffrey's yards, and then we just filtered it who had the most total yards last year. It would probably be a very strong correlation to where you finish in PPR leagues. So, I mean, you can check out the article. It's pretty consistent too for RB2s. If you're looking for an RB2 or potential RB1, you're looking for a guy that's going to finish between 17 and 25%. These guys are likely candidates for RB2 numbers. And then there's some outliers down here. These are some guys that didn't have a lot of yards, but they had a lot of catches and a lot of these are more of your pass catching backs or backs that exclusively score touchdowns. But the main thing is, I kind of put in some points of action here. So the main thing is to target running backs over or around 25% yard share. That's a strong indicator that they're going to be an RB1 or at worst an RB2. Another indicator here is RBs above 15% yard share are strong bets to finish as wide receiver or running back twos or like a top 30 back. And then I got some other charts and some stuff here for you guys to look at. So we are just going to look at my 2020 projections here, and we are going to filter here by yard share. So I have this stat built in. So we're looking here at the top 12, and I'm just going to read these guys off. So if you had to put my money on it, I would say 9 or 10 of these running backs that I'll read off here in the top 12, 9 or 10 of them are going to finish probably as RB1s. So Christian McCaffrey, yes. Saquon Barkley, of course. Derrick Henry, yes. Dalvin Cook, yes. Josh Jacobs, he's probably going to be a top 10 guy. Nick Chubb, top 10. Joe Mixon, we think he can finish in the top 10. We saw Le'Veon Bell and Leonard Fournette. These are the two guys that are super interesting because we don't expect their offenses to be very good. We don't trust these players at all. But yet they come in with a very high amount of yard share, meaning that they are going to be the most used player on their team to move the ball. If you look at the Jets and the Jaguars, these two players are going to account for the most yards on that team. So that's something to think about. I don't feel comfortable calling these guys RB1s, but I would say it's a really strong indicator that they're going to be at least an RB2, a top 15, a top 20 back. That seems really likely to me. And then you got a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, and Aaron Jones. So I would say all of these guys, besides Bell and Fournette, are very likely to be RB1s. The weird thing is Alvin Kamara sits just outside the top 12 in yard share, and that's because he doesn't get a lot of rushing attempts and a lot of yards, but he's going to catch a lot. And they also have Michael Thomas, and they throw the ball a lot, so there's a lot more playmakers there to spread it out. So maybe yard share is not the best way to look at this. So I'm just going to create a total yards column real quick, and then we'll filter this out. So if I just do equals sum of rushing yards, and then we'll add in receiving yards. So it's telling me I got Christian McCaffrey going for about 2,160 yards. So then I'm just going to drag this all the way down for all my running backs here. Just a second real quick. This will be an interesting study because this might be a better indicator, because as we saw, if I show you again, I'm going to show you guys the chart again. For running backs, total yards was the most important stat for fantasy football. So even more than snaps, touches, receptions, all that, and it's by a good margin too. It's it's not close like some of these other numbers are. So now we can kind of go ahead here and we will filter. Let me just add this to the filter. So we will filter this and we will see who rises to the top. Okay. So my top 12, hold on, I'm going to redo that. Sorry for just be patient here. I've never done like a live stat issue like this. So now we got our top 12 running backs, a little bit different. So you see Alvin Kamara raised up. It's pretty much the same guys, but this pushed Alvin Kamara up. It pushed Leonard Fournette down. It pushed Le'Veon Bell down. So it looks like Leonard Fournette's got a strong case to finish as a top 15 back. Same with Le'Veon Bell. But as you see here, I can try to, we'll get that bigger so we can see everything here. So again, the top 12 running backs, I have, they're almost at like about a 1,500 clip. So if you have a running back you think is going to, run for 1,000, 1,100 yards, and then he's going to catch 300 or 400, these are the running backs you're looking for. So for running back, here's kind of the Mendoza line, but 1,400 total yards. I think that's a really strong indicator that this guy is going to be an RB1. So this is just a really interesting stat that I like to look at. You want a running back that's going to get a lot of yards. You don't really care, even in PPR leagues, you really don't care about receptions. I mean, look how high Derrick Henry is. Look how high Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb. These guys aren't going to catch a lot of passes, but they're going to be used so damn much. I got Jacobs going for 290 carries, Nick Chubb 285, Derrick Henry 310. These guys are potential rushing champions this year. So target running backs. That's the most actionable advice I can give you. Target running backs who are going to uh, rack up a lot of yards, and that can be rushing or receiving. Um, but it's like I said, it's a very strong indicator as to what's going to happen for fantasy finishes. So now that I got that out of the way, I'm going to look at receivers, this receiving column here, and it's kind of the same thing. It really is. I guess there's another thing for tight ends too, but the number one stat for fantasy PPR with receivers and tight ends, it's going to be receiving yards, and then not far behind it is receptions. Receptions are right there, and targets. So we can look at total receiving yards, we can look at total receptions and total targets. If we look at these guys and figure out who's the best of those bunch, I think we're going to have a really strong indicator as who's going to finish as a wide receiver one. So let's go ahead here and look at, we're going to filter here just by receiving yards. And I got Michael Thomas leading the league in yards. But my top 12 receivers projected in yards: Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Kenny Galladay, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper. So it's super interesting here. There's some guys that you wouldn't expect to be in the top 12. A guy like Terry McLaurin, maybe AJ Brown. You see guys get boosted like Kenny Galladay, Mike Evans. These guys are bigger play guys, so that makes sense. But then let's take a look at the wide receiver twos real quick. Michael Gallup is my 13th ranked receiver here in total yards for this season. Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, Adam Thielen, Juju, Odell, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, DJ Chark, DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton. I think basically you can draft any of these receivers. Like, I really don't care which one you take. If you wanted to, I mean, if you've been watching my videos, you know I've been pumping up draft receivers rounds 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, you could legit make a crazy tandem of 4 of these guys that I have highlighted here. You can get 4 of those dudes to be your wide receiver platoon this year. And the darling for me is Michael Gallup. I'm getting Michael Gallup everywhere. One guy that kind of falls here that I do like is Tyler Boyd. So let's go ahead. So that chart that we looked at, it said receptions and targets are very crucial. So we'll just look here at receptions. So these guys might be another good indicator as to what's going to happen. Thomas, Adams, Allen Robinson's way up here. I have him 3rd in receptions. Juju's high up there. Some guys that move up are Robert Woods, Adam Thielen, Cooper Kupp, even Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen comes in pretty strong here, and I've been kind of down on Keenan Allen. But a guy like Tyler Boyd, Deontay Johnson's coming into the top 24, Edelman, Crowder, that's an interesting development there. And then if I filter here by targets, let's see who else kind of rises above here. Terry McLaurin and Robert Woods are chilling in the top 12. Juju's the 5th ranked receiver. I got, Tyler Boyd at 16, Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, Cortland Sutton. So it's really just a good way to look at some of these things. So I guess the cutoff here is basically receivers who are projected over 130 targets, I would say have a really strong, potential to be a wide receiver one. And then if we just look at the yards real quick. So our metric is we want players over 130 targets. And then for yards, it looks like we want players who, are going to be somewhere in that 1,100 plus range. Although I guess I have, wide receiver 20 down here with 1,100 yards. So if you think a guy can flirt with, 1,200 yards, 130 receptions, I think that's going to be, what you're going to want to value as far as receivers. And then I guess it's the same with tight ends, really. I mean, if we filter here by receiving yards, this could legit just be your ranking. So Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Ertz, Mark Andrews, that's the consensus top 5. But again, it's all about receiving yards, targets, and receptions for these tight ends. So I think this is just going to be a quick video. I just kind of wanted to show you guys some interesting, stats and different ways of looking at things. You can look at things, in these windows of yards. So like I said, 130 targets plus for a receiver, somewhere over 1,100 yards. That's a strong indicator that a receiver is going to have a strong year. And then for running backs, we kind of looked at that floor of, an RB1 is going to get somewhere between 13 and 1,400 plus yards. And then we also looked at, kind of the total yard share percentages, which is a good way to look at it. But again, for running backs, we filtered here by yards, and my RB12 projected right now, he's sitting at about almost 1,400 yards. And then for RB2s, basically anyone that's going to be over 1,000 yards total rushing receiving, they have a really strong chance of being in an RB2. You see, I have my RB28 here. That's the last guy over 1,000 all-purpose yards. So those are kind of the tiers and the things to look for that I like to have been kind of adding to my research lately. So I hope you found this useful. If you are not subscribed, please do so. Leave a like, leave a comment. If you have any questions or you have any drafts coming up that you guys need some questions answered on, I'm down to chat in the comments below. Follow me on Twitter. And thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.